Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Don't Risk It podcast presented by VFIS Client Risk Solutions. This program focuses on the exposures our clients frequently encounter and discusses some potential solutions to help reduce these exposures. I'm your host, Chris Rodgers with VFIS Client Risk Solutions, and today we're discussing emergency service organizations and their relationship with their 911 centers. Joining me on the program today is Blair Tyndall from the VFIS Client Risk Solutions team. Blair is joining us today to discuss some things to consider to enhance your relationship with your local communications center. Blair, thank you for joining me today. It's a pleasure to have you on the program.
Thanks, Chris, for having me back.
Absolutely, sir. So let's start off with why is a good relationship with your 911 center so important?
Well, Chris, I feel like over the years I have seen different scenarios in several different states and counties, and it does seem that a lot of times the responders out in the field kind of live in a silo, and the 911 center kind of lives in a silo. And there can be so much benefit from understanding and tearing down those silos and being able to understand what each other does, and it can just make for so much more of a productive relationship.
So let's follow up on that, understanding what each other does. You know, what are some of the stereotypes that the providers in the field might have about the communication center, and vice versa? What are some stereotypes that the communication center might have about the field providers?
Well, I had the privilege of being a 911 center director for a while after being an emergency responder. So I had kind of seen both sides of the coin. The folks in the field think the 911 center operators are just sitting in their chairs, taking a nap, doing absolutely nothing, looking at Facebook or reading a magazine or whatever, when that's the furthest from the truth. And the 911 center operators are usually jealous of the first responders because they are able to get out and move around, be in different vehicles, go out to eat, have different experiences, see sunshine and those kinds of things. So it's really until both organizations can understand what each other are faced with and the challenges that they're faced with, it can create some animosity between the two groups. And when that animosity is created, it just breeds friction when they're talking to each other. So it's really important for each group to get out there and understand the challenges that the other group faces. You can do ride-along programs. You can do, bring the first responders in the field into the center, let them see what goes on, take the 911 operators out to the field, let them see what they're facing, because a lot of times that experience has not been had.
So that's kind of where you were going. I was going to dovetail into my next question. What can your agency do to improve the current relationships that you might have with the communication center if it's one that's kind of turned sour?
Well, first of all, I'm on take the side of the 911 center operator. The first responders in the field need to understand that the 911 operator is the first responder. So they are the person that hears the very first initial call. They're the person that has to deal with all of the emotions of the caller. They have to sometimes drag information, coerce information out of the 911 caller for various reasons. It could be such a tragic event or such a tragic emergency that they have to get those things down, and in some cases that's not even possible. If the event is so traumatic to that individual or it's very widespread, then sometimes it's really hard for the 911 operator to gain the proper information they need to give to the first responders. So in that respect, you will hear a lot of times responders in the field say, well, why didn't they tell us that when they, didn't they know that we were going into this area, or didn't we know this was the type of call we were going to? A lot of times the 911 operator doesn't have that opportunity to gain that information. They're just trying to get some help there. So it's important that you build that relationship from administrator to administrator. So that's one of the key things that I'd like to touch on today, is that the So the EMS chief, EMS captain, EMS administrator, fire chief, take the time to go over and meet with the 911 administrator, okay, and understand what challenges they're facing from a staffing standpoint, how their job is done, the things that they have to do. So that's kind of step one as far as establishing that relationship. And then step 2 and 3 that we can talk about as well is understanding how they can do things to help each other. It's not an adversarial relationship. It's not the 911 center against the first responders and the first responders against the 911 center. So small things like that can make a big impact are taking time to understand. For example, one that we always used in my center is if the fire department goes out and the fire department takes out 5 vehicles to an incident, let's say a large fire, or there's multiple fire departments on a call, when the call's finished and everybody gets ready to go back, every single fire truck that was on the fire doesn't need to check back en route to their station and then check back at their station. Let one fire truck say all our units are en route back, and then one fire truck say all our units are back at the station. That cuts down on that telecommunicator having to do 15 transmissions versus 2 transmissions, right? So that's just one example. That's simple things that can be done to lessen the load on what the telecommunicator is having to handle.
So in your opinion, it's a good idea to not just communicate with our communication centers in an emergency call capacity. We should develop those relationships outside of that emergency call. Go and speak with the folks when it's just a general day, to develop those relationships. So we're not only talking when everyone's heightened.
Exactly. That is definitely one of those things that needs to be addressed. And that's one thing that we always lean towards, and that most of your national communication center organizations like APCO and NENA, these national organizations for 911, encourage having developing a communication plan between the 911 center and all of the people that they quote unquote dispatch or that they handle calls for, so that everybody can be, for example, speaking the same terminology, not using 10 codes, using plain language to communicate, setting a protocol of how they're going to check en route to calls, how that type of call volume is going to be handled. So once that communications plan is established, then you're exactly right. When the adrenaline hits, everybody can revert back to that plan as a default, and hopefully eventually move to a place where they can, continue to work together. So it's very important to have that high-level communication early on in developing that, and then continuing to pull that back in, having, maybe monthly is a little much in some of our smaller jurisdictions. Maybe quarterly would work, but certainly in a larger organization, monthly meetings with the 911 center. If you have a debriefing on a call in your agency, an EMS or a fire debriefing after a large event, invite your 911 center folks in and let them tell you what they heard from their side and what obstacles they faced on that particular call. But bridging that gap, because what we don't want is what we see so many times is the 911 center folks are over in a building, nobody knows who they are, they never see them, and vice versa. The first responders don't know who they are, they just hear a voice on the radio. And we all know from a social aspect, if you put a face with a name, it just makes everything work that much smoother, right? If I only talk to you on the phone or the radio, I don't have a lot of feeling for what kind of person you are, reading body language and those kind of things. But if I meet you and spend time with you, usually that helps to foster those relationships.
Absolutely. So one final question, what does a long-term relationship include with your 911 center, in your opinion?
Well, I think continually being able to evaluate call volumes, understanding that most centers are understaffed, just like most first response agencies. So continuing to evaluate what can we do better, what can we do different. In many cases, larger jurisdictions have an advisory board, so they may have a 911 center or communication center advisory board. So again, like I mentioned just a second ago, having those cross-referencing from fire, EMS on the 911 board and vice versa really helps address everybody's needs. I mean, we're all in it for the exact same reasons. And I think a lot of times the 911 center folks get overlooked as being that first line of defense. They have a lot to deal with when that phone rings, and understanding those challenges is going to make everything work better. But long term, even a QA process for the 911 center to QA their calls, as well as like EMS and fire QA and their type calls, having debriefings, and just staying in touch and building that relationship so they're not siloed, like we said in the very beginning.
And to follow up on that, you're probably not the only agency that they're dispatching. So everybody's got a different personality. So to get, as you said, to get in front of them face to face, and so that we can develop that relationship organically and not just rely on basically talking to an operator. And as I said, everyone's got their own unique personality. So to go in front of those people and let you know that you're all on the same team, it's much better to do that in person in an office setting versus just communicating in an emergency capacity.
That's exactly right. And, inviting them to come to your training sessions, you going to their training sessions, seeing what they have to put up with, just makes, a world of difference. And trying to understand each other, I think, is a real benefit.
As you said, we're all shooting for the same goal and on the same team.
That's right. Yep.
Well, Blair, it's always a pleasure to have you on the program. I appreciate you stopping by and sharing this great information with you. So thank you, and it's good to see you, bud.
Thank you so much for having me again, Chris.
And I want to thank you for listening to the program and for your interest in VFIS safety resources. I want to thank Blair Tyndall once again for his time and information. Please consider subscribing to our program to stay up to date on new content releases. Also, if you like what you've heard, please consider leaving a review below. For more information about the many resources available from VFIS, please visit VFIS.com. And to submit ideas for future discussions, please reach out by email at VFISriskcontrol@VFIS.com. Thanks, everyone, and have a great day. The views, information, or opinions expressed during this program are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent those of Gladfelter Insurance Group, VFIS, and its employees.